Distributed denial of service is a very common attack on the internet. It is the main attack on the availability of information systems. It consists of flooding a network or a server with very large amounts of traffic from different sources, making the network or the server unavailable. As we will see, it's a very easy attack to mount and very difficult to prevent. So before we talk about distributed denial of service, let us talk first about denial of service in general. A denial of service attack is an attack to make a resource or a service unavailable. So first we can mention that a simple buffer overflow attack can cause a denial of service if the targeted service is vulnerable to buffer overflow attacks. But generally, a denial of service consists in flooding the target service with fake requests to overload the service and prevent legitimate requests from being fulfilled. Now, if the traffic, and this is very often the case, if the traffic comes from different origins, then there is a DDoS attack, and in this video we will focus on DDoS attacks. In fact, we can distinguish between two types of DDoS attacks. DDoS attack via a botnet, which is the most common type of DDoS attack, and DDoS by amplification, which is less known but can be very efficient. So let's first look at the DDoS attack via a botnet. A botnet is a network of computers infected with malware bots. So when I say a network, I do not mean a geographically located network. I mean a set of infected computers or devices spread almost everywhere in the world, but under the control of a given attacker. Most of the time, users of the infected computers are unaware of the fact that their computer belongs to a botnet. Most likely, their computer has been compromised beforehand via the exploitation of a software or human vulnerability. Infected computers are sometimes referred to as zombies. As I said, the botnet is under the control of a single attacker, and the attacker can launch a DDoS attack by ordering the bots to all flood the target with requests. So the botnet consists of a set of thousands and even more computers infected with a bot. The attacker cannot practically directly order all these bots to launch a DDoS attack, at least not in a coordinated manner. So the attack is more likely to succeed if the generated bandwidth is large and sudden. If the bandwidth generated by the attack increases too slowly, it gives the administrator of the targeted service time to implement some protections. Thus, between the attacker and the botnet, there are these command and control centers that are also under the control of the attacker. And the attacker will launch an attack via these command and control centers. So the bot will receive the order to attack more or less at the same time, and the target service is suddenly flooded and becomes unavailable. So this was the DDoS attack via a botnet. In a DDoS by amplification, the attacker sends a DNS query to several DNS servers, spoofing the source IP address of the target victim so that the responses are all sent to the target victim. The attacker has limited bandwidth. He may have a few bots under his control, but he may only be using his own computer. So, how is it that responding to these queries can make the target victim unavailable? Well, the idea behind the amplification attack is to send requests that will require large responses. And the larger the responses, the more likely the attack is to succeed. To give you an idea, a common DNS amplification attack has a ratio of 70 bytes of response for 1 byte of query, but it can be much more than this. So let's get more details on this attack. At the center of the attack are these open DNS resolvers, which are basically poorly configured DNS servers that will recursively act as resolvers to retrieve responses to DNS queries. I say poorly configured because these DNS servers will respond to queries from anywhere on the internet and not from a given trusted domain, as should be the case. The attacker prepares a specific query, specifically designed to generate a large response, and sends it to as many DNS servers as possible, spoofing the IP address of the target victim. The target is suddenly flooded with a large amount of data, which it cannot process and becomes unavailable. Of course, the attacker continues to send queries for keeping the target service unavailable. A DDoS attack, whether it is via a botnet or by amplification, can last several hours or several days. The bandwidth of DDoS attacks is constantly increasing and can now reach more than 1 terabyte per second. With regard to DDoS by amplification, any UDP-based protocol that produces responses significantly larger than queries can be used for an amplification attack. You know that TCP requires establishing connections, and it is less suitable for launching DDoS attack by amplification. I do not mean it's impossible, but it is more difficult to use TCP for an attack by amplification. As UDP protocols that can be used for an amplification attack, I would like to mention the Memcached protocol. The Memcached protocol actually doesn't use UDP anymore, but I want to talk about it because it has an incredible amplification factor. And before UDP was disabled in this protocol, it was used in 2018 in very disruptive DDoS attacks by amplification. So what is this Memcached protocol? Memcached is a caching system often used in websites whose HTML pages are largely fed with data extracted from databases. Memcached is used by websites like Facebook or YouTube. A single 210 bytes request could trigger a response of 100 megabytes of data to the target. So I'll let you calculate the amplification factor. But it's more than 70 for 1. Starting from March 2018, several attacks using this protocol were observed throughout the world, generating sometimes bandwidth approaching 2 terabytes per second. Even the small island of Tahiti, where I live, was the target of such an attack. DNS servers of the main internet provider in Tahiti were hit by an attack by amplification using Memcached, and that attack lasted several days. And the funny thing is that the attacker was from Tahiti and was a 14-year-old boy. So we have seen the DDoS attack via a botnet and the DDoS attack by amplification. The question now is, what can we do to prevent such attacks? Preventing them is almost impossible. I mean, preventing them would mean preventing the botnets from existing. I don't know if it's possible. And eliminating protocols that can be used in amplification attack. So we are not going to talk about these unrealistic solutions. We are simply going to talk on solutions to mitigate the effects of a DDoS attack. First of all, let us mention that firewalls, load balancers, proxy servers, all these traditional tools to control network information flows are not efficient against DDoS attacks, and they are very often the first elements to become unavailable. The best solution to mitigate a DDoS attack is to use one of these two diversion techniques: DNS redirection, BGP redirection. Any of these two solutions requires an early detection of the DDoS attack. And here, the firewall can help to alert about the attack. I mean, before the firewall becomes unavailable, of course. And it also requires a cloud-based DDoS mitigation service where the traffic should be redirected. And of course, this cloud-based DDoS mitigation service should have enough resources to handle the inbound traffic. So let's first explain DNS redirection. Let IP1 be the IP address of the targeted website, which is mysite.com. Let IP2 be the IP address of the cloud-based mitigation provider. DNS redirection works by changing the A record of the target website, mysite.com, from IP1 to IP2 in the DNS database as soon as the DDoS attack is detected. So I remind you that the A record in the DNS database is a record that maps a name like mysite.com to an IP address. For querying the website mysite.com, a client, whether it is a malicious client or not, needs the IP address of mysite.com. So first the client asks its DNS the IP address of mysite.com. Since the A record of mysite.com has been changed, the DNS server returns IP2, which is the IP address of the mitigation service. So all HTTP queries for mysite.com are now redirected to the mitigation service. And the mitigation service filters out malicious queries. On the slide, the red query is blocked. The mitigation provider uses some algorithm to identify illegitimate traffic. Then the mitigation service redirects legitimate queries to IP1, which is the IP address of mysite.com. For the legitimate traffic, the mitigation service is like a proxy server. And of course, outbound legitimate traffic that consists of HTML pages sent by mysite.com, this traffic goes through the mitigation provider. Now the question is, what if the attacker knows the IP address of the target website? Well, if the attacker knows the IP address of the target website, then it doesn't need DNS resolution. And in that case, DNS redirection will simply fail. However, there is another solution. It is called BGP redirection. As you most probably know, Border Gateway Protocol is a protocol that is used on the internet for the gateways to exchange routing information. So, let us explain this BGP redirection. And let IPNet1 be the IP network to which the IP1 address belongs. IP1 being the IP address of mysite.com, I remind you. BGP redirection will force the traffic to IPNet1 to pass through the mitigation provider. So once the DDoS has been detected, once the DDoS attack has been detected, BGP redirection is set. This means that gateway to mysite.com stops announcing that it has route to IPNet1. And routers on internet will gradually update their tables and erase the information that there is a route to IPNet1 that goes through this gateway which is close to mysite.com. On its side, the mitigation service starts announcing and will keep announcing that it has a route to IPNet1. This information propagates on the internet. And now the inbound traffic to IPNet1 and mysite.com goes through the mitigation provider. And like for the DNS redirection, the mitigation providers the mitigation provider filters out malicious traffic. The red query is blocked. Now, the mitigation provider cannot forward the legitimate traffic to mysite.com by using the internet, since there is no official route going to IPNet1. So the legitimate traffic is forwarded through a tunnel called the generic routing tunnel. I'm not going to enter into details. You can think of this tunnel as a kind of virtual private network or an SSH tunnel or even a direct physical link. And of course, the outbound traffic will follow the same path in the opposite direction. BGP redirection is more reliable than DNS redirection, but it is financially more costly. Moreover, enforcing BGP redirection can be done within a minute, the time to route information to propagate on internet. Enforcing DNS redirection, on the contrary, can require several minutes before it becomes effective. The time to DNS servers to update their cache. So, if the attack generates a very high and sudden bandwidth, BGP redirection will work where DNS redirection may be too late. Okay, so in this video we focused on the two most devastating types of denial of service attacks. The DDoS attack via a botnet and the DDoS attack by amplification. These two DDoS attacks should not make you forget that there can be also denial of service attacks that can be carried out by a single computer without any intermediary. Such denial of service attacks, not distributed, exploit some software or protocol vulnerabilities. In the video, I mentioned the denial of service that can be caused by a buffer overflow if the target service is vulnerable to buffer overflow. There is also this attack, which I have not talked about, which is called the SYN flood attack, which consists of flooding the target TCP service with many SYN requests, all coming from a single computer. This attack can be blocked by a well-configured firewall. As for the DDoS attacks, we have seen there is no real solution except mitigating them by using traffic redirection. And BGP redirection is the most efficient approach.